They say silence can be peaceful. But sometimes, it's just loud enough to remind you what's gone. The key turned in the lock with a tired click. The door groaned as it opened, spilling a ribbon of light into the old community hall. I stood in the doorway for a long while, afraid to step inside. The smell was the same old wood, lemon polish, and the faint echo of laughter that no longer belonged to anyone here. This was where we used to hold everything: potluck dinners, choir rehearsals, quilting circles, Christmas fairs. And where he, my Harold, would always stand near the back, hands folded, pretending not to watch me lead the town's art class. Now, only the clock on the far wall kept him company. Ticking, always ticking. The wooden floors complained beneath my steps. Every sound felt like memory cracking open. I ran my hand along the long table where our quilting group once sat: Evelyn, Ruth, Clara. It had been nearly a year since we'd gathered here. A year since Harold's heart gave out one spring morning, leaving behind the quietest kind of emptiness. For months, I stopped sewing. I stopped almost everything, really. The house became a museum of half-finished things: folded fabric, unwashed teacups, a chair that still leaned the way he'd left it. But grief has a way of unraveling in its own time. And one afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found a square of fabric I'd nearly forgotten: pale blue cotton, with tiny embroidered daisies. Harold's shirt. The one he wore the day we met. That's when the thought arrived, soft, insistent, like a whisper from a friend I hadn't seen in years. Maybe it's time to start stitching again. I came back to the hall the next morning, broom and bucket in hand. The sun slipped through the dusty windows, turning the air gold. Halfway through, I heard the door creak open behind me. "Good Lord, Martha Green," a familiar voice called. "You're really doing it." It was Evelyn Parker, 82 years old, walking miracle of sharp wit and sharper needles. She stood there in her floral coat, holding a tin of shortbread like a peace offering. "I thought this place was done for," she said. "Guess not," I smiled. "Not if we still remember it." We sat on the old steps with tea from my thermos. Evelyn looked around the hall, shaking her head. "Do you remember the quilt we started? The one for the library fundraiser?" "How could I forget?" I said. "We never finished it. Too many stories left untold." She sighed. "Maybe we should start another." That night, the idea kept me awake. What if we gathered again? Not just to sew, but to remember? A memory quilt. Each of us bringing a piece of fabric: a shirt, a handkerchief, a curtain, something that held a story. We could stitch them together, thread by thread, and maybe stitch ourselves back together too. It sounded small. But small things have a way of mending big holes. The next morning, I made some calls. Ruth answered first. "Martha. Lord, I haven't heard your voice in ages. You still alive over there?" "Barely," I said. "Well, that's a start," she laughed. "What's this about a quilt?" When I told her, she went quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "I'll bring something special. See you Thursday." Clara took longer to convince. She'd been struggling lately forgetting names, faces, sometimes even days. When I called, she hesitated. "Oh, Martha, my hands aren't what they used to be. My memory neither." "Then all the more reason to come," I said. "We'll remember together." There was silence. Then a small, uncertain laugh. "All right. I'll come. But only if you bring cookies." The last person I called wasn't really part of our old circle. Her name was Ann Whitmore. She'd just moved into the old Sullivan house on Elm Street. A friend from church said she'd lost someone recently. I hesitated before dialing. But something told me this was a group for broken hearts, not perfect stitches. When Ann answered, her voice was soft, almost careful. I told her what we were doing, and she listened quietly. Finally, she said, "I don't sew, Mrs. Green, but I could try." That was enough. Thursday afternoon came. I laid the old quilt frame in the center of the room. Evelyn arrived first, arms full of fabric, clucking about my terrible folding habits. Then Ruth burst in humming an old gospel tune, the kind that makes you want to smile even when your heart's tired. Clara followed, slower, wearing her thimble like a badge of honor. And finally, Ann Shy, holding a folded piece of soft white linen. We sat in a circle, as we used to. For a moment, no one spoke. The air felt thick with things unsaid. Then Ruth said, "Well, ladies, what do we start with?" I unfolded the piece of pale blue cotton and placed it in the center. "This," I said. "Harold's shirt." Evelyn smiled softly. "Good choice. What will it be?" "A corner piece," I said. "He always liked the edges. Said that's where things hold together." Everyone nodded. And then, slowly, the stories began. Evelyn pulled out a faded patch from her wedding dress. Ruth laid down a square from an old stage gown, deep purple satin, torn but still shining. Clara brought a scrap from a baby blanket she'd made 40 years ago. Ann hesitated, then placed her piece on the table, the white linen embroidered with a single name, Grace. No one asked. We just listened. Hours passed. Needles moved, stories wove. Laughter found its way between the quiet moments. At one point, Ruth began humming again, and soon the whole room joined, not quite singing, just breathing in rhythm. As the sun dipped low, I looked around the table at their faces, at the fabric slowly turning into something larger than all of us. And I thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. Not fixing the past, but stitching the present into something that can hold it. The hall isn't empty anymore. It breathes again with stories, with laughter, with the sound of thread pulling through fabric. Sometimes, we don't need to start over. We just need to remember where the thread begins. They say every stitch holds a story. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't the sewing, it's the remembering. After that first gathering, we decided to meet every Thursday afternoon. The same hall, the same table, the same circle of chairs that seemed to wait for us all those years. We called ourselves the Memory Quilt Circle. Evelyn said the name sounded too sentimental. Ruth said it sounded just right. I suppose both were true. Each week, one of us would bring a new piece of fabric and a story. The rule was simple: no interruptions, no judgment, and no apologies. We just listened. That Thursday, it was Evelyn's turn. She reached into her sewing bag and pulled out a small square of ivory lace, delicate but frayed around the edges. "This," she said, holding it up, "was from my wedding dress. 1957. The hottest day of the summer." Ruth chuckled. "You mean the day you made poor Frank sweat through his tuxedo?" Evelyn smiled. "Yes. He was so nervous, he forgot his vows halfway through. But I married him anyway. And for 60 years, I never let him forget that." Her voice trembled, but her hands didn't. "I kept this lace all these years. I used to think I was saving it for my granddaughter's dress. But maybe," she looked down at the fabric, "maybe it was for this." I reached over and touched her hand. "You're stitching love into every thread, Evelyn." She nodded. "That's all any of us can do, isn't it?" Next came Ruth. She rummaged through her basket and pulled out a shimmering square of deep purple satin. "This one," she said proudly, "was from my stage gown. Back when I thought I'd be the next Aretha Franklin." We all laughed. Ruth leaned back, eyes distant but bright. "I sang in smoky bars, church halls, county fairs, anywhere they'd let me stand near a microphone. I used to think my voice could carry me anywhere. But then," she paused, "then I had my first daughter, and I realized the stage I wanted most was right at home." Clara said softly, "Do you miss it?" Ruth smiled. "Every day. But I don't regret it. Some songs, you only get to sing once if you're lucky, it's the right one." Evelyn nodded. "And now you're sewing your encore." We all laughed again, but this time, it sounded different, gentler, like the hum of something shared. Clara went next. She hesitated, searching through her basket until she pulled out a small piece of faded yellow flannel. "This was from my daughter's baby blanket," she said. "I made it when I was 22. My hands were steadier then." She traced the worn fabric with her finger. "She used to drag this thing everywhere. One day, I came home and found her using it to wrap her doll. I told her she was too old for it. She cried all night. I've kept this piece ever since. She smiled faintly. She's grown now. Lives in Chicago. Calls once a week if I'm lucky. Her voice dropped. Sometimes, I forget what we talked about the last time. I hate that. So I write it down, every word, every call. Just so I can read it back and feel like she's still close. No one said anything for a while. Then Anne whispered, "That's beautiful, Clara. You're stitching memory into memory." Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. That's all I have left some days. Threads and memory. When it was Anne's turn, she hesitated. She unfolded a square of white linen, the same one with the embroidered name, Grace. "My daughter," she said quietly. She would have been 19 this year. The room went still. No one breathed. Anne continued, her voice soft but steady. She loved the color white. Said it reminded her of clouds. When she got sick, I used to sew her pillowcases with this fabric. I told her every stitch was a wish. I think I sewed 1,000. Ruth reached out. Anne shook her head gently. "It's all right. I'm not sad anymore. I'm grateful. Because even though she's gone, she still teaches me how to love. Every day. Every breath." Evelyn whispered, "Then she'll live in this quilt forever." Anne smiled. "That's all I wanted." When the others finished, they looked at me. I hadn't planned to share that day. But silence has a way of nudging the truth out of you. I pulled a square of light blue fabric from my basket, the same one from Harold's shirt. When Harold retired, I began. He took up painting. He said it was time to make a mess for once in his life. I smiled at the memory. He painted sunsets, barns, even the old lake pier. But his favorite was this hall. Said it had good bones. I looked at the square of cloth. When he passed, I found this piece tucked in his paint box. I think he kept it because it reminded him of me. Evelyn said softly, "And now you're keeping it to remember him." I nodded. Maybe love never leaves, it just changes hands. We sewed for hours that day. Stories overlapped, laughter replaced the pauses, and slowly, the quilt began to grow. Each square seemed to hold more than fabric, it held breath, touch, memory, love. When we finally stood to leave, I noticed something. The air felt lighter. We weren't just stitching a quilt. We were stitching each other back together. As everyone packed their things, Ruth turned to me. "You know, Martha," she said, "we should give this quilt a name." Evelyn smirked. "You mean besides the wrinkled wonders?" Ruth laughed. "No, something real. Something that means something." And spoke softly. "How about The quilt of memories. Clara smiled. That's perfect. I nodded, my throat tightening just a little. Yes, I said. That's exactly what it is. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those women, their stories, their courage. How each one had brought a piece of her heart and laid it gently on the table. And I realized we're all made of the same fabric, really. Some of us torn, some faded, some frayed at the edges. But when you stitch us together, we make something strong enough to last. Sometimes, healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering together. They say every quilt has a hidden thread, the one that holds all the others together. I think loss might be that thread. It hurts, but it binds. It had been 3 months since we began our memory quilt. By then, the hall no longer smelled of dust but of tea, fabric, and laughter. The quilt was halfway done, a mosaic of color and memory. But the stories were getting heavier. You could feel it in the silence between stitches. That Thursday, Clara didn't come. She had never missed a meeting. I called her daughter, who told me Clara had wandered off the day before, confused, and a neighbor found her sitting by the lake with a grocery list in her hand. When I told the others, the room fell quiet. Evelyn pressed her lips together. She's been slipping more each week. You can see it in her eyes. Ruth whispered, "What if she forgets us?" No one answered. We just sat there, the air thick with the kind of fear you don't know how to name. And finally said, "Then we'll remember for her." That simple. That true. The next week, Clara returned. She looked tired but happy, her hair tied back in a way that reminded me of her younger days. She carried a small box. "I found this," she said, placing it on the table. "I think it's my mother's." Inside were buttons, dozens of them, all colors, shapes, and ages. Some pearl, some wooden, some chipped. Evelyn gasped. "Mercy, that's beautiful." Clara smiled faintly. She used to collect them. Said every button held a story of something lost and something kept. Her eyes clouded for a moment. "I can't remember where I got them from, or why I kept them. But they feel like home." I reached for her hand. "Then let's sew them on. Each one will hold a memory in place." Clara nodded. "Yes. Before I forget." That afternoon, we sewed in silence. The sound of thread pulling through cloth became a kind of prayer. When Clara's hands shook, Evelyn guided her needle. When her memory faltered, Ruth filled in the missing pieces. At one point, Clara looked up and said softly, "Sometimes I forget faces. But I never forget how people make me feel." That's the funny thing about memory. It doesn't always live in the mind. Sometimes, it lives in the heart. Anne's eyes filled. "That's the truest thing I've ever heard." Later, as the others packed up, Clara stayed behind. She held up the quilt, tracing her square with her finger the yellow flannel from her daughter's baby blanket, now surrounded by buttons. She smiled. "It's beautiful. You know, I can't always remember yesterday. But this I'll remember." I smiled back. "That's all that matters." As she left, I noticed she had left her thimble on the table. I picked it up, wondering if she'd remember it next week. The following Thursday, she didn't come. Her daughter called that morning. Clara had been moved into a care home. Her memory was fading faster than anyone expected. We sat in silence again and wiped a tear. Ruth whispered, "Should we keep sewing?" I looked at the unfinished quilt, draped across the frame like a question waiting for an answer. "Yes," I said. "For Clara." As we worked, Evelyn suddenly said, "You know, when my Frank died, I stopped touching his things. His coat, his books, everything. I thought if I kept them untouched, I could keep him close." She paused, eyes distant. But I was wrong. It wasn't the things that held him. It was the stories. Ruth nodded. "Yeah. Love doesn't live in the keeping. It lives in the telling." And added quietly, "and in the sharing." We all nodded. That's when I realized we weren't sewing fabric anymore. We were sewing grief. And somehow, it didn't hurt as much when we held it together. A few days later, I went to visit Clara. She was sitting by a window, humming to herself, sunlight falling on her hands. I said, "Do you remember me?" She looked up, smiling gently. "Of course. You're the one who sews the blue sky." I laughed softly. "Yes, that's me." She pointed at the small quilt folded in her lap. "I've been practicing," she said proudly. It was uneven, loose, but beautiful, full of bright colors. "Who are these for?" I asked. She smiled. "For my friends. The ones who remember me." I held her hand and said, "We always will." The next week, we added Clara's quilt piece to ours. Evelyn stitched her name carefully into the corner. Ruth tied the final knot and whispered, "For the woman who remembered love." No one spoke after that. We just sat there, letting the light fall across the fabric, watching the threads glimmer like veins of gold. Sometimes, love isn't about holding on. It's about letting the story live where you can't. That night, I wrote in my journal, "We are stitched by loss, but held by love." And maybe that's the only kind of permanence we ever get. They say time heals. But I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal, people do. And sometimes, we do it with nothing more than a needle, a story, and a little courage to begin again. After Clara left, our group grew quieter. Her empty chair sat by the window, and we never moved it. It felt wrong to fill the space she left behind. Still, we kept sewing. Every Thursday, we showed up, maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope. Each stitch was slower now, but steadier. Anne was the one who started talking about the past that day. She looked at the quilt spread across the table and said, "You know, I used to think grief was a wall, something you had to climb over. But now I think it's more like fabric. You carry it, you wear it, it softens with time." Ruth nodded. "Yeah, but it still tears sometimes." And smiled. "Then we mend it." That's how the name for the next part of our quilt was born, the mending section. Evelyn brought a patch from an apron her mother had sewn. She said, "Mama used to tell me, a torn cloth can be mended, but a careless heart takes longer." I didn't understand back then. Now I do. She placed the fabric down gently, her hands trembling just a little. Ruth laughed softly. "You know, my mama said the opposite, that hearts mend faster than hems if you feed them enough pie." We all burst into laughter. It felt good to laugh. It felt like something returning, not joy exactly, but its cousin, maybe peace. As the days passed, I noticed something changing in all of us. Evelyn smiled more. Ruth started humming again, even brought her old guitar one afternoon, and stayed longer each week, her quietness softening into warmth. One afternoon, she stayed after everyone else had gone. I was folding the fabric when she said, "Martha, can I tell you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "I never told you the whole story about Grace." I nodded and waited. "She wasn't just my daughter," Anne said. "She was my only child. When she died, I blamed myself. I kept thinking if I'd seen the signs sooner, if I'd stayed home that day." Her voice broke. "For years, I carried that guilt like a weight I couldn't set down. But being here, hearing your stories, it made me realize Grace wouldn't have wanted that. She'd have wanted me to keep living, to keep creating." I reached out and held her hand. "You are, Anne. You're stitching her light into ours." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Then she'll never be gone." "No," I said. "None of them ever are." A few weeks later, we received a letter from Clara's daughter. It was short, but it said everything it needed to. "Mom passed peacefully last Sunday. She was humming when she went. The nurse said she kept saying your names." The letter ended with a small note. She had your quilt picture on her nightstand. "Thank you for giving her something to remember." Evelyn cried quietly. Ruth wiped her eyes with her sleeve and whispered, "Then she remembered love till the end." I nodded. She did. That day, we decided to sew one last piece into the quilt, a small patch of soft white cotton embroidered with Clara's name. Evelyn said, "We should stitch it in the center. That way, every time we add something new, it touches her." Ruth smiled through tears. I like that. So we did. After we finished, we sat for a while, staring at the quilt. It was no longer just fabric and thread. It was a map of our lives, our sorrows, our forgiveness. It held us together in ways we hadn't even realized we'd been falling apart. And said softly, "It's beautiful." Ruth added, "It's heavy." Evelyn smiled. "Good. That means it's real." I ran my hand along the edge. "We should show it at the autumn festival. Let people see what stories look like when they hold hands." Everyone agreed. For the first time in a long time, there was excitement in their eyes, a spark of something alive. That night, as I locked the hall, I paused by the doorway. The place that had once felt so empty now pulsed with memory. The laughter still lingered in the walls, the scent of tea and fabric in the air. And for a moment, I imagined Harold standing there, smiling the way he used to when he saw me working, proud, quiet, content. I whispered, "We did it, love. We found our way back." Then I turned off the lights and went home, feeling lighter than I had in years. A week later, at the festival, the quilt hung in the center of the community hall. People stopped, touched the fabric, asked questions, smiled. Children pointed out the colors, older folks recognized the names stitched in the corners. Evelyn stood beside me and said, "You know, Martha, maybe that's what memory is, a quilt big enough for everyone to touch." I smiled. "And warm enough to keep us together." Ruth laughed softly. "Then we'd better keep sewing." I looked at them, these women, my friends, my family, and I thought, maybe that's what healing really means. Not moving on, but holding on differently. They say every story has an ending. But sometimes, endings are just another way of remembering. It had been almost a year since we began the quilt. When I spread it across the table that morning, sunlight touched every piece: Harold's blue cotton, Evelyn's lace, Ruth's purple satin, Anne's white linen, and Clara's soft yellow flannel. All stitched together, all still here. We decided to hold one last gathering. Evelyn brought shortbread, Ruth carried her guitar, and came with a small box tied with ribbon. The hall felt full, not just with us, but with everyone we had ever loved. Ruth said, "Hard to believe we did this." Evelyn smiled. "Hard to believe we almost didn't." And added, "Maybe that's how all good things start, with a little hesitation and a lot of heart." We laughed, the kind of laugh that feels like a deep breath. When the tea was poured and the light turned golden, I stood and said, "I have something to read." It was a letter. Not to Harold, not to Clara, not even to myself. It was for whoever might come after us. I unfolded it slowly and began. "To whoever finds this quilt one day." We were 5 women who met in a small town by a lake. We had lost things: husbands, children, time, memory. but we found each other. Each piece of this quilt holds a story, stitched by hands that trembled but never stopped trying. We didn't sew to remember the past. We sewed to give it a place to rest. If you touch this fabric, know that you are touching lives. Laughter, love, and every tear we turned into thread. We hope you'll add your own piece someday. Because memory isn't something you keep. It's something you share. When I finished, no one spoke for a long time. Then Evelyn wiped her eyes and said, "Well, that's the best thing you've ever written." Ruth smiled. "Let's sew that letter into the back. It belongs with the rest." So we did. As evening fell, we hung the quilt in the front of the hall. People from town came to see it, children pointing at colors, old friends recognizing the patterns. A few asked if they could add their own patches next year. We told them yes. That was always the point. And stood beside me and whispered, "Look at them, Martha. We started something." I nodded. A story that doesn't end. Later that night, after everyone left, I stayed behind. The hall was quiet again, but not empty. The quilt hung in the light of a single lamp, shimmering softly, a constellation of fabric and time. I sat down and whispered, "Harold, we did it. We made something that will outlive us." For a moment, I almost heard him say, "You always do." I smiled. Maybe. But this time, I had help. Before I left, I wrote one last note and pinned it under the quilt. We are all stitches in someone else's story. May yours be warm, may it hold, and may it be passed on. Then I turned off the light. Outside, the night was quiet, the stars scattered like scraps of cloth across the sky. And I thought maybe that's what we all are, in the end. Little pieces of love, sewn into something bigger than ourselves. The next morning, when I walked by the hall, I saw the door slightly open. A little girl stood there with her mother, staring up at the quilt. She pointed to one of the patches and said, "Mom, it looks like the sky." Her mother smiled. "It does, sweetheart. It really does." The girl whispered, "I want to make one someday." And I smiled to myself, because that's how memory works. It doesn't end. It just begins again, in someone else's hands.